Hey, this is Doug Padgett, and I'm doing some interviews via Skype with the different presenters who are going to be part of the Church Planters Academy May 3rd through the 5th of 2012 in Minneapolis. And I'm fortunate enough to talk to Mike Stavlund. Mike is out in the Washington, D.C. area and is part of a church called Church of the Common Table, which I think is one of the great names. Hey, Mike, thanks for being part of the Church Planters Academy.
I'm so excited about it, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, right on. Tell us about Church of the Common Table, how it got started, and what your role is in it.
Church of the Common Table got started about 10 years now. We just had our 10-year anniversary. And it was started, I would say, actually, my story intersects in a way, because I was a part of a church a vineyard church plant that started a couple years before that in Washington, D.C. itself. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't a part of Common Table at the beginning, but they got their start close by in the sort of the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And was started by a man who was studying to be an Episcopal priest, and he was in a parish in South Carolina, and was, I think, as he tells the story in later years, kind of getting tired and frustrated with the way things were and the traditions he felt like he had to live into, and he wanted to do something fresh. So he didn't come here and plant an Episcopal church, but it certainly had tons of that influence from his background and his interests. And so there's still a few, we still use some of the liturgies from the Episcopal Church and stuff. But he basically was planting a church, I would say, out of a kind of a format of how churches got planted back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so he had got a venue pretty quickly and got things set up and was trying to do a certain kind of services each week. And I think after it was about a year, he really kind of hit a wall and ran out of a lot of energy. He said later when I talked to him about it that he felt like he had planted this church in rebellion, and he really, which I thought was, wow, if I did things like that out of rebellion, that would be a great thing. But
what a rebel.
Productive rebellion, yeah. But he felt like he was kind of running from something and needed to go back to South Carolina, and so he did. And as far as I know, he's still down there and doing really well. I think the best thing and the worst thing he did at the same time was he left without really leaving a kind of a team in place or a plan in place or a program. He just kind of left for whatever reason he did. And like you said, that was really difficult.
And what is it that made that the best thing? I mean, I can imagine it would make that hard, that people didn't know what to do next. What was it that made it the best thing?
What makes it good is, it's sort of a sink or swim.
Yeah.
Right? As I was told when I was learning to swim, just throw the kid in the deep end and we'll see what happens. That's how it was back in the day. And that's kind of how they need to, were they going to, because they didn't have any real reason, they realized then, to do things the way he had done them, or to follow in the sort of traditions that they had set up in that year. They could kind of make things work the way they wanted to make them. There were a couple of people in the church who were pretty influential, who were systems engineers, and they'd studied a little bit of chaos theory and emergence and things like that, and so they knew they needed to not manage that process too closely or too carefully. They kind of needed to let things be messy and organically come to what they wanted them to be. And so, part of what that meant was there was a period of time where they now say we now say they plowed the church on here. The plowing under faith, where they just said, this is really hard and it's not working and we should get a pastor or not, make all these kind of conditional decisions. Let's just stop meeting publicly and let's try to do some service projects to kind of do something in our community. We feel like we've talked a lot about that. We haven't really done it. And so they quit all their public meetings and they just started meeting every week. I think it was weekly, to do service projects in homeless shelters and things like that. And that ended up giving them a whole new kind of energy and a whole new group of people who were excited about that.
Right.
And I came along at the tail of that. Yeah, you can imagine a lot of people said, oh, okay, you're actually doing this stuff? That's great. I want to be a part of that too.
Yeah.
I came along at the sort of tail end of that. And again, my story intersecting with this was I snuck in the back and sat in the back row because I was just coming out of the church plant in D.C. that had ended really painfully and really with great difficulty. We'd buried that church, and so I was just coming to find a place where I could kind of do church after, and wasn't really telling anybody my story or my background or anything. So before I confessed that I'm a trained pastor and I've been to seminary, they said, would you come on staff with the church? We'd love to have you kind of bring what you bring to it.
Yeah.
And after I'd been there for 6 months or so, I guess. And that's when I confessed, actually I'm a pastor, if that's okay. And they
they weren't opposed to that, even though they weren't in favor of it.
As long as I didn't come at it from it, that's actually a funny thing, because part of what they decided was there's an assumption and there's all this inertia that we need to have a pastor. We don't want to have a pastor. We don't feel like we need to have a pastor. We feel like we've got pastoral gifts within the church, and that should be good enough. And so they weren't opposed to me. They just didn't want me to come in and do everything like pastors too frequently do.
Yeah. So in some ways, the church had kind of two beginnings to it, huh? One that had the originator, the pastor that was driving the agenda, and then the restart a year later when you got involved. So
it was much more. Yeah, that's a great way. And that restart was much more broad based, much flatter, and kind of simpler too. But definitely people bringing what they had. It was kind of the priesthood of all believers really embodied there.
And now a lot of people think, well, the way you do this is you maybe have to start a church with a pastor that's not going to be paid, as the full-time work and sort of running the whole show. But at some point, you really want to grow into that. But you all haven't taken that approach at all. You haven't said, well, as we grow and more people join us, if we can last a little longer, then we'll add in more people. That hasn't been your approach?
No, there are not many formal decisions that we make, but one of the things that's pretty clear is that we're not going to have a full-time person at all. So when I came on staff, I was a part-time person. There was another part-time person as well, who's not, and I mean, her background is she's an engineer, and she was on staff to do the things that she brought. I came on staff to do the things that I do. So I think if we hired more staff people, it would still be in a part-time capacity.
Yeah.
We don't want to have one person kind of running things, and that's a hard thing to establish. It gets easier every week and every year because more people come and more people, not a ton of people come. We're still not that big. It's maybe 30 or 40 people a week. But I'm going to tell you that like every one of those people knows this thing doesn't work unless we bring what we bring. And it is what we make it, so it's a great place.
Well, Mike, tell us the website if people want to poke around and look at Common Table before they come. May 3rd through the 5th, you can come meet Mike in person at the Church Planners Academy in Minneapolis. But in the in-between time, you can check him out online. What's the website?
It's commontable.org.
Commontable.org. Great. Hey, Mike, thanks. And I will look forward to seeing you at the Church Planners Academy, May 3rd through the 5th, 2012. And commontable.org. Thanks, Skype. Appreciate your technology. Hey, we'll see all of you in May in Minneapolis, hopefully. Bye from Minneapolis and from Washington, D.C.